It was a gray Sunday afternoon when Ethan Miller's quiet life turned upside down. The city outside his window was drenched in rain, the kind that painted the streets silver and made the world feel heavier. He had planned to spend the day alone, reading and catching up on work. But the sudden knock at his apartment door broke that peace, and when he opened it, his two aunts, Grace and Lillian, stood there with tense faces and wet coats. Ethan blinked, surprised. It wasn't often that they came together, and never without calling first. Grace, the older of the two, had a soft kindness about her that always comforted him. She was gentle, patient, and had been like a second mother when he was younger. Her smile could calm anyone, but today it was nowhere to be found. Beside her stood Lillian, her younger sister, confident and outspoken, always dressed with elegance that seemed effortless. But now even Lillian looked uneasy. "Ethan," Grace began quietly, her voice trembling as she stepped inside. "We need to talk. It's important." He took their coats, confused by the serious tone. "Is everything okay? You both look worried." Neither of them answered right away. Lillian walked toward the window, staring at the rain, while Grace sat down on the couch, clutching her hands together. The air felt heavy, as if the rain outside had found its way into the room. Finally, Grace looked up at him. "It's about your Uncle Henry," she said softly. Ethan froze. Henry was Grace's husband, a man he deeply admired. Henry had always been a rock in the family, kind, steady, the one who showed up for everyone. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Was he sick? Had something happened? What about him? Ethan asked. Grace hesitated, glancing at her sister. Lillian sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Grace, maybe you should just tell him." Grace nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, I think Henry is hiding something from me. I think he's been unfaithful." The words hit Ethan like a sudden storm. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The thought of his Uncle Honest, loyal Henry being unfaithful seemed impossible. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace shook her head. "I don't know for sure. But he's been acting strange. He comes home late, he hides his phone, and he doesn't talk to me like he used to. When I ask, he says work has been stressful. But Ethan, I can feel it. Something's wrong." Lillian turned from the window, her arms crossed. "I've told her for months something was off. Men don't just change for no reason." Her tone carried frustration, not just toward Henry, but toward the situation itself. Ethan sat down, trying to process everything. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. Grace's voice broke as she said, "Because I don't know what else to do. I can't confront him without proof. And I can't live with this doubt anymore. You're the only one I trust. Ethan, you're smart.com. And Henry won't suspect anything from you." Ethan blinked, realizing what she was asking. "You want me to find out if he's cheating?" Grace nodded slowly. "Yes, just observe him. Talk to him. See if you notice anything." Ethan leaned back, torn. The idea of spying on his uncle felt wrong. Henry had been a father figure to him when his own parents divorced. He had taught him how to ride a bike, how to tie a tie, how to face the world with integrity. But the pain in Grace's eyes made it impossible to refuse. "I'll see what I can do." Ethan said at last. Grace reached out, squeezing his hand with gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan. I just need the truth, whatever it is." Lillian finally turned from the window and sat beside her sister. "Grace isn't the only one who deserves the truth," she said, her eyes flicking toward Ethan. "Henry's lies, if there are any, affect all of us. We need to know who he really is." There was something strange in Lillian's tone, something deeper than anger. Ethan couldn't quite place it, but it made him uneasy as they spoke. He studied them, the sisters who had always been so close, now united by pain. Grace's face carried years of quiet love and worry. Lillian's expression was sharper, full of suppressed emotion. Despite their differences, both women seemed broken in their own way. Grace wiped her eyes and tried to smile. "Do you remember when you were little, Ethan, and you used to stay with us every summer? Henry adored you. He used to say you were like the son we never had." Ethan nodded quietly. "I remember. That's why I trust you," she said softly. "You'll see the truth. You always do." Lillian stood up, impatient. "We should go. It's getting late." Ethan walked them to the door. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the streetlights glowed through the mist. Grace turned before stepping out, her eyes full of silent pleading. "Please, Ethan, whatever you find, tell me. I need to know." He nodded, but inside he felt the weight of what he had agreed to. When the door closed, the silence that followed was suffocating. He sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where they had just been. He thought of Henry's laugh, its calm wisdom, the way he'd always looked at Grace with what seemed like love. Could all that have been a lie? Ethan didn't want to believe it, but he also couldn't ignore the look on Grace's face, half heartbreak, half hope. Later that night, as he sat by the window watching the city lights shimmer through the rain, Ethan realized his life had just changed. What began as a quiet Sunday had turned into a mission he never asked for. He was about to step into a web of secrets, that emotions that could tear his family apart. He didn't know it yet. This was only the beginning, the moment everything in his world would start to unravel. Somewhere in that storm, between loyalty and truth, Ethan would have to choose which mattered more, protecting the people he loved, or revealing the secrets that could destroy them. The night deepened, and the rain fell harder again. Ethan sat there for hours, his mind circling around the same thought. What if Grace was right? He didn't have an answer that Ethan couldn't sleep that night. Grace's tearful face kept replaying in his mind, her trembling voice echoing in his thoughts. The idea that his Uncle Henry, the man he respected all his life, might be hiding something dark was unbearable. Yet deep down, he knew Grace wasn't the kind of woman to imagine things. Her pain was real, and it demanded answers. The next morning, Ethan decided to start quietly. He didn't want to accuse anyone or stir drama before knowing the truth. So he did what he always did. He acted normal. He called Henry, pretending it was just a casual check-in. "Hey, Uncle Henry, lunch this week?" he asked cheerfully. Henry agreed immediately, his voice steady and friendly as always. "Sure, Ethan, Wednesday. Same place as usual." "Perfect," Ethan replied, though his heart was uneasy by Wednesday. He had convinced himself to stay calm and simply observe. When Henry arrived at the small downtown cafe, he looked like the same man Ethan had always known, neatly dressed, charming, and relaxed. He smiled, joked with the waitress, and talked about his latest work project. For a while, Ethan felt guilty for even suspecting him, but small details started to bother him. Henry's new phone was always face down on the table. Every few minutes, the screen lit up and he'd casually turn it off without checking. When Ethan asked about work, Henry gave short answers, quickly changing the topic. He looked restless, as if he was hiding something behind his smile. At one point, Ethan caught a faint scent of perfume on Henry's jacket knot, the soft floral kind Grace always wore. But something stronger, expensive, unfamiliar. Henry noticed his curious look and gave a quick laugh. "Oh, that. One of the clients hugged me today. You know how those events go." He said it too quickly. Ethan forced a smile, but said nothing. His instincts told him Grace had been right. That evening, he drove to Grace's house. She opened the door, her eyes tired but hopeful. "Did you see him?" she asked, trying to sound calm. Ethan nodded. "Yes, he seemed fine, but there were small things that didn't feel right." Grace sat down slowly, bracing herself. "Like what?" Ethan hesitated, not wanting to hurt her. He had a new phone he kept hiding, and there was perfume on his jacket. He said it was a client, but it didn't sound convincing. Grace's face fell, but she didn't cry. Instead, she took a deep breath and whispered, "I knew it. He's not the same man anymore." Lillian, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen doorway, walked in and crossed her arms. "So it's true," she said bitterly. "He's cheating on her." Ethan turned to her. "We don't know that yet. We just have suspicions." Lillian shook her head. "Men like Henry don't change without a reason. I've seen it before." Her tone was sharp, full of anger that felt personal. Ethan noticed how tightly she held her coffee mug, as if her own heart was hiding something too. Grace looked up at her sister. "Lillian, please, don't make this worse. I just need to understand why." Lillian softened for a moment. "I'm sorry, Grace. I just hate seeing you like this. You've given him everything." Ethan watched them, two sisters bound by love and now by pain. He wished he could fix it, to bring back the warmth that once filled this house. But truth doesn't heal quickly. It first burns through everything that hides it. T. But something inside him whispered that by the time he did, nothing would ever be the same again. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to stay close to Henry without arousing suspicion. He invited him to a weekend barbecue, helped him with errands, even stopped by his office one afternoon. Each time, Henry seemed distracted. Sometimes even defensive when Ethan asked simple questions. Once, when Ethan mentioned Grace's name, Henry's smile faded slightly. "She's fine," he said curtly, then added, "Marriage just gets complicated after so many years." That sentence stayed with Ethan. Complicated sounded like a quiet confession. A few days later, Grace called him again. "Ethan," she said softly, "he started staying out late. Says it's work. But I checked, his office closes at 6. Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew what that meant, but didn't have the courage to say it. "I'll find out," he promised. That night, he drove past Henry's office building around 8. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for one car, Henry's. He waited. 10 minutes later, the office lights turned off, and Henry came out, looking around nervously. He wasn't alone. A woman stepped out behind him, laughing quietly. She was younger, dressed in a long red coat. They spoke for a moment. Then Henry gently touched her arm before they walked off together toward the back street. Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't follow them. He couldn't. The truth was already loud enough. He sat in his car, staring at the rain on his windshield, unable to move. Everything Grace had feared was real. Henry was seeing someone else. And Ethan was now the one who had to break her heart with that truth. Later that night, he returned home, exhausted. His phone buzzed. It was Lillian. "Did you find anything?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, almost a calm. Ethan hesitated. "Yes, he was with someone. I saw them together." Was silence on the other end. Then Lillian whispered, "I knew it." Something in her tone caught his attention, not just anger, but sorrow. Deep, personal sorrow. "Lillian, are you okay?" he asked carefully. She paused, then said, "Grace doesn't deserve this. None of us do." And before he could reply, she hung up. The next morning, Grace called again, her voice trembling. "Ethan, did you find out anything? Please tell me the truth." Ethan didn't know how to speak. Every word felt heavy. He didn't want to destroy her hope, but lying would be cruel. "Grace," he said softly, "I saw him. He was with another woman." There was silence. Then a sound, a quiet sob, broken and fragile. "I see," she whispered. "Thank you for telling me." He stayed on the phone, listening to her cry quietly. He wanted to say something to make it better. But there was nothing that could fix this. Later that evening, Lillian came to see him in person. Her expression was cold, but her eyes were full of pain. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Grace needed to know. Ethan nodded, still troubled. "She's heartbroken." "I know," Lillian said, looking away. "But it's better than living in lies." Something in the way she said it felt strange, like she was speaking from experience. Not just anger. As Lillian left, Ethan stood by the window, watching her walk into the dark street. He realized the truth wasn't done revealing itself. Grace's pain was only the beginning. There was something else, something Lillian wasn't saying. And in that quiet, uneasy moment, Ethan understood that sometimes discovering the truth doesn't bring peace. It only opens doors to deeper secrets waiting in the shadows. He had uncovered Henry's betrayal, but he could sense that the story didn't end there. Someone else was carrying a secret, one that would change everything he thought. He knew about his family, The truth had begun to surface, but the storm was far from over. The week after Ethan told Grace, the truth felt painfully quiet. She had withdrawn into herself, barely answering calls, and when she did, her voice sounded hollow. Ethan wanted to check on her, but she needed space. What he didn't expect was a late-night call, not from Grace, but from Lillian. "Ethan." Her voice trembled over the phone. "Can we meet? Please, it's important." There was something in her tone that made him agree without question. Within half an hour, they met at a small cafe near the outskirts of town. It was nearly empty, the lights dim. Rain drizzling outside again, as if the sky couldn't stop mourning, when Lillian walked in. Ethan was startled by how different she looked. Gone was the confident, polished woman who always seemed in control. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around a cup of coffee. "I shouldn't have called you," she said quietly, "but I can't carry this anymore." Ethan leaned forward. "What's going on, Lillian? Is it about Grace?" She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes, but it's also about me." He waited, confused but patient. Lillian took a shaky breath. "There's something you don't know about Henry. Something I should have told you long before you got involved." Ethan felt his heart quicken. "What do you mean?" Lillian looked up and tears filled her eyes. "Henry and we made a mistake. A terrible one. Months ago, before Grace started suspecting anything, he came to me. He said he felt lonely, lost in his marriage. He needed someone to talk to. I thought I was helping him, but it turned into something else." Ethan froze. "You mean? You and Henry?" She nodded slowly, guilt heavy in her voice. "It wasn't a full affair, Ethan. It was one night of weakness, one I regret every day. He came to me drunk, upset, saying Grace didn't love him anymore. I should have turned him away. I didn't." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He didn't know what to say. Lillian, his aunt, Grace's own sister, was part of the betrayal Grace had been crying over. The truth was so much worse than he'd imagined. Lillian continued, her voice trembling. "After that night, I told him never to come near me again. He agreed, said it was a mistake, and that he loved Grace. But a few months later, found out about the woman you saw him with. That's when I knew Henry hadn't stopped lying. He had just found someone else." Ethan pressed his hands together, struggling to process it all. "Lillian, does Grace know any of this?" "No," Lillian said quickly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "And she can't. She's already broken. If she finds out that I was part of it, Tevin, for a moment it will destroy her." Ethan stared at her, torn between anger and sympathy. "So what do you want me to do?" "I need you to help me tell her the truth," she whispered. "Not about me, about Henry. She deserves to know everything he's done. But leave me out of it. Please, Ethan. I've already punished myself every day for what I did." Ethan leaned back, his mind spinning. He wanted to believe her, but part of him felt betrayed. Lillian had watched Grace cry for weeks, knowing she was part of the story. She had asked Ethan to uncover the truth while hiding her own. He sighed. "You're asking me to lie to protect you." Lillian shook her head. "No, I'm asking you to protect Grace from even more pain. What good would it do for her to lose her husband and her sister on the same day? Let her heal without knowing how deep the betrayal goes." Ethan didn't answer right away. The cafe was silent except for the faint sound of rain hitting the windows. He looked at Lillian, and for the first time, he saw the weight she carried, the shame, the regret, the exhaustion of keeping secrets too long. After a moment, he said quietly, "You're right about one thing. Grace doesn't deserve more pain. But secrets have a way of finding their way out, Lillian. You can't hide from the truth forever." She nodded, her voice breaking. "I know, but please, not yet." When Ethan left the cafe, his heart felt heavier than ever. He had entered this mess to help Grace find answers, but now he was part of a deeper lie. The night air was cold, the streets nearly empty. He stood under a streetlight, staring into the rain, wondering how something as pure as love could turn into so much pain. Over the next few days, Ethan avoided both aunts, unsure what to do. He knew Grace needed to know more about Henry's secret relationship, but how could he face her knowing part of the truth was about her own sister? Finally, Grace called him. Her voice was quiet, calm in a way that made him nervous. "Ethan, can we talk?" They met at her house that evening. She had tried to make tea, but her hands trembled too much to pour it properly. "I just want to understand why," she said softly. "Why would Henry do this to me? What did I do wrong?" Ethan wanted to tell her she had done nothing wrong. That sometimes people break not because they stop loving, but because they don't know how to face themselves. But words felt too small. He told her what Lillian had asked him to, everything about Henry's second affair. How long it had been going on, how he had been lying for months. Grace listened without interrupting, her eyes full of quiet sorrow. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ethan. You did what I couldn't do. You found the truth." But then she looked up and said something that pierced him. "There's still something missing. I can feel it." "Something you're not saying." Ethan froze. He wanted to tell her everything, but he remembered Lillian's tearful face, her desperate plea. He forced a small smile. "No, Grace, that's all I know." She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to believe him. Then she simply nodded. "All right." That night, Ethan left her house feeling sick with guilt. He had protected one truth, but buried another. In trying to spare Grace pain, he had become part of the lie. Later that night, his phone buzzed again. It was Lillian. "Did you tell her?" "Yes," he said flatly. "And she doesn't know about me." "No," he replied. "But she suspects something. She's not as blind as you think." There was silence. Then Lillian said softly, "Thank you, Ethan. You did the right thing." Ethan hung up, staring at the dark ceiling above his bed. For the first time, he didn't feel like the honest, dependable man his family always saw him as. He felt like someone caught between two broken hearts, one seeking truth, the other drowning in guilt. As he closed his eyes, he realized this wasn't over. Grace would heal, but the truth always finds a way to rise. And when it did, it wouldn't just break. Henriette would shatter everything the sisters had left between them. The storm wasn't ending. It was only gathering strength. The truth had been spoken, but peace never followed. After Ethan's confession, Grace's world became painfully quiet. Her house, once full of soft music and laughter, now felt hollow. She moved through her days like a shadow, speaking little, thinking much. Henry still didn't know that she had learned about his betrayal. She hadn't confronted him yet. She was waiting maybe for courage, maybe for the right moment, but Ethan knew the confrontation was inevitable. He checked on her every few days. Sometimes she would smile faintly and tell him she was fine, but her eyes always gave her away. She wasn't fine at all. Grace had spent her life believing love could fix anything. But now, she saw that even love could crack beyond repair. Lillian stayed distant for a while. She sent short texts to check on her sister, but avoided seeing her face to face. The guilt had become too heavy. Ethan knew she was barely holding herself together. He wanted to tell her to come clean, to free herself from the secret, but every time he looked at Grace, fragile and lost, he couldn't bring himself to destroy her further. One Saturday morning, Grace finally called Ethan and said quietly, "He's home today." "I'm going to ask him." Ethan froze. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" "I need to," she said softly. "If I don't face him now, I'll never find peace." He didn't try to stop her. He just promised to be nearby if she needed him, that afternoon. The storm finally came not from the sky, but from within Grace's home. Henry returned from running errands to find Grace waiting for him in the living room. She was calm, almost too calm, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. "Henry," she began softly, "can we talk?" He smiled faintly, not sensing the gravity of her tone. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Grace looked down, steadying herself. "I know Henry. I know about her." The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he tried to laugh it off. "Grace, what are you talking about?" "Please don't lie to me," she whispered. "I've seen it. I've heard enough." Just tell me the truth." Henry's shoulders slumped. He rubbed his face and sighed. "It was a mistake, Grace. I never meant to hurt you. A mistake." She repeated, her voice trembling. "Months of lying. Sneaking around? That's not a mistake, Henry. That's a choice." Henry tried to speak, but his words faltered. "I was lonely. We stopped talking, stopped being close. I didn't plan for it to happen." Grace stood up, her calm finally breaking. "You didn't plan to betray me. You just accidentally forgot the woman who stood by you for 20 years. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice remained firm. "I would have forgiven anything: loneliness, distance, even mistakes. But not this. Not you pretending to love me while living a lie." Henry looked down, guilt written across his face. "I ended it, Grace. It's over." She shook her head. "No, Henry, we're over." She turned away before he could answer. It was the last thing she said to him that day. Ethan arrived shortly after Henry left the house. Grace sat in silence on the couch, her eyes red but dry. She had no more tears left. When she saw him, she simply said, "It's done." He sat beside her, not saying a word. The quiet stretched between them, heavy but strangely peaceful. Grace finally exhaled. "Do you know what hurts the most, Ethan? It's not that he cheated. It's that he let me believe everything was fine while he built another world behind my back." Ethan listened, his heart aching for her. "You deserve better," he said softly. She smiled sadly. "I deserve the truth. And now I have it." Days passed. Grace began making changes, small ones at first. She redecorated the house, removed old photos, and packed Henry's things into boxes. She didn't cry as she worked. It was as if the act of letting go gave her strength again. Meanwhile, Lillian couldn't stay away forever. She visited one evening, standing on Grace's porch with trembling hands. Grace opened the door, surprised but calm. "Can I come in?" Lillian asked quietly. Grace nodded and stepped aside. They sat at the table in silence for a long time. Finally, Lillian whispered, "Grace, I'm sorry for everything you've been through." Grace looked at her sister's tearful face and felt something stir inside her, pain mixed with love. "It's not your fault, Lillian. Henry made his choices." Lillian bit her lip. "Still, I should have protected you. I should have said something sooner." Grace frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Lillian froze. Her eyes filled with panic, realizing she had said too much. She tried to cover it up. "I just mean, I saw the signs earlier. I should have warned you." But Grace's eyes lingered on her. She didn't fully believe her sister, but she didn't press. Maybe part of her already knew there was more to the story. But she was too tired to chase it. After a long silence, she said softly, "We can't change the past, Lillian. All we can do is move forward." Lillian nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Grace looked at her sadly. "Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs peace." The sisters hugged an embrace that carried both sorrow and love. It didn't erase the past, but it began to heal it. Later that night, as Ethan drove home after visiting them, he thought about everything that had happened. In trying to protect Grace, he had uncovered the darkest parts of their family, and yet somehow they were still standing. Henry eventually moved out of town. Grace found a quiet job at a small bookstore, where she spent her days surrounded by stories instead of memories. Lillian started therapy, trying to face her guilt and rebuild her bond with her sister. Ethan often visited both women. With time, he saw the light return to their lives. Grace started laughing again, softly at first, then freely. Lillian began to help her with small things, like gardening and cooking. The pain didn't vanish, but it became something they could carry without breaking. One evening, months later, Grace invited Ethan and Lillian to dinner. It felt almost normal again. The three of them sat together, eating, sharing quiet smiles. When Grace raised her glass, she said something that stayed with Ethan forever. "To truth," she said softly, "it hurts. It ruins things. But it also sets us free." They all raised their glasses. In that simple moment, Ethan understood that healing didn't mean forgetting it meant choosing peace over pain. That night, as he drove home, he thought back to the first day his aunts had shown up at his door. How confused, scared, and broken they had looked. Now, though their hearts carried scars, there was strength in their silence. Love had failed them in many ways, but honesty had rebuilt what lies destroyed. As the night lights of the city shimmered in his rearview mirror, Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. The storm that had shaken their family had passed, not without damage, but with lessons that would last forever. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just end a story, it begins a new one.